STEM has become a huge part of the American education system. Across the country, school districts and teachers are encouraging more and more students to go into STEM careers. And even the federal government has stepped in numerous times to encourage these fields. But if the American education system originally focused on the humanities, how did STEM emerge as the dominant area of academia? And are the humanities as important in today's society as STEM? These are the questions future teachers have to think about, because while STEM is important, society needs well-rounded professionals whose skill set is more universal than just one area of study. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The acronym was actually introduced by the United States National Science Foundation, the NSF, in 2001 to replace the previously used acronym SMET. STEM education has become a huge part of American education, even before the official acronym. STEM education is defined by the 2012 report Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Education, a primer, as teaching and learning in the fields of STEM, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It typically includes educational activities across all grade levels, from preschool to postdoctorate, in formal and informal settings. The humanities cover a very long list of subjects, but the most common are history, literature, philosophy, religion, and visual or performing arts. As Stanford defines it, the humanities are the study of how people process and document the human experience. These subjects have been at the core of American education since the beginning. The 1850s and after was an important time for American education as a whole. Reform movements were trying to centralize schools and uniform them, at least a little, to guarantee that all students were getting a good education. The subjects taught to students were reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography, but most students only went up to an 8th grade education. At the end of 8th grade, students were allowed to take a final exam that they had to pass, and if they did, they were finished with school for good. Here's an example of a final exam from 1895 from a school in Salina, Kansas. Some lucky students did go on to a high school and college education, but a majority couldn't because they had to help their parents harvest or bring in extra income for the entire household. Not much changed in curriculum after that until the 1950s.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket. Here, an artist's conception of how the feat was accomplished.
On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite into space, Sputnik 1. This began not only the space race, but education reform that would put STEM at the forefront of people's minds. The launch of Sputnik woke up the nation, serving as a focusing event that put a spotlight on a national problem. In this case, the problem was education. Prior to Sputnik, the National Science Foundation Authorization Act of 1950 had already passed. This legislation established in the executive branch of the government an independent agency to be known as the National Science Foundation. The NSF throughout the early 50s pushed for education reform, but until the launch of Sputnik raised the stakes, not much had been done. A year after the launch of Sputnik, the National Defense Education Act of 1958 was passed. The purpose of the bill was to strengthen the national defense and to encourage and assist in the expansion and improvement of educational programs to meet national needs. While this did not specifically mention STEM, Title III of the bill is titled financial assistance for strengthening science, mathematics, and modern foreign language instruction, which provided states matching funds to strengthen mathematics, science, and foreign language instruction, which included better equipment and materials, along with better professional development for teachers. This gave momentum to the NSF and STEM-based education reform movements, and throughout the later 1900s, STEM subjects became highly encouraged. In fact, Steve Rissing, a biology professor at The Ohio State University, recalled, "My friends and I didn't realize it, but our school, and especially our curricula, had changed. Our high school biology and physics books were products of a new national effort to reform and expand science education." In 1984, the Education for Economic Security Act of 1984 was passed. This authorized teacher institutes and mathematics and science education development programs at the NSF, directed the Education Department to provide grants to states and local educational agencies for STEM teacher training and development, and authorized presidential awards for teaching in mathematics and science. This came after reports that despite emphasizing STEM in schools, American students were not at the same level as other countries when it came to these subjects, and there was a growing concern, and still is, that the United States will have trouble competing internationally. As mentioned earlier, in 2001, the acronym STEM was officially used. Throughout the 2000s, there have been many things implemented to encourage more students to go into STEM fields. Every year on November 8th, schools across America celebrate National STEM Day, which is an entire day dedicated to encouraging students to go into STEM fields. Some activities include building robots, doing science experiments, and hearing from STEM professionals on the careers that students can go into. Some colleges, like Simpson College, Union University, and many others, have STEM days for visiting high school students to showcase their STEM programs. Now, while STEM is obviously important, the humanities and the fields within them are equally as important. These skills include writing, critical thinking, and evaluating and communicating complex ideas. Writing is a skill all professionals need, and one mainly developed in humanities classrooms. This is a universal skill that can be transferred into any STEM field as well. Dr. Mark Eisner says, "Humanities graduates can write, a critical skill in the workplace and one many STEM graduates do not have." Another important skill that the humanities teaches is critically analyzing and thinking. Again, this is another universal skill that is mainly taught in humanities classrooms. Dr. Elwood Watson says, "The fact is that one does not become successful or proficient in any endeavor or any profession, and that includes STEM fields, without a good solid grounding in critical thinking skills that liberal arts or humanities education provides." Even in today's job market, in a study conducted by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, businesses and employers were aggressively seeking to employ graduates who possessed a demonstrated capacity to think critically, communicate clearly, and solve complex problems. These are the skills that anyone who pursues an education in the humanities will often receive. Now, this is not to say that the humanities is more important than STEM, but instead this is to point out that the humanities and STEM work together to form well-rounded professionals. As teachers or future teachers, there must begin to be an understanding that the subjects work hand in hand, and that emphasis should be put on what the students are passionate about. Teachers in the humanities must make sure that students understand that the humanities are essential, and that there is nothing wrong with pursuing careers in them.